Hello, good morning everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this International Care of Children and Young People in Modern Russia, a conference looking at challenges and perspectives. My name is Max Alexander Walker. I'm here representing the International Department of Don State Technical University. So, if we could begin, our first part will be looking at the main areas of social work with youth. So, the youth social position. Youth is often defined as a socio-demographic group that includes people of certain age with specific social positions, social functions, a sphere of interest and values. Before talking about social status and youth protection, the age range of this section of society should be determined. Modern scholars believe that the age limit is relative. It can be anything from 13 to 14 to 29 to 30 years old. However, it is not only a life cycle phase, but also a certain social status connected with its main activities, that of study, army, work, and others. In the beginning of the 21st century, a noticeable demographic change has happened in the youth environment that perfectly describes the situation of the Russian youth in our society. Its overall size now is more than 32 million, or 22% of the total population. The main reason of natural population change is a permanent decreasing of the birth rate. High youth mortality gives cause for concern. Above all, it has a bearing on young men. At the age of 30, mortality amongst men is twice as much as among women. There are a lot of problems associated with the health of young people. Quality has decreased. A number of atypical diseases for young people before have now increased, and there has been a growth in the rates of venereal disease and HIV infection. The main reason for health deterioration among young people is the critical state of society and its following results: poor nutrition, decreasing number of sanitary institutions, and others. Youth status in the educational sphere is very questionable. It is undisputed that young people are willing to attain knowledge, to study in universities and colleges. However, at the same time, there is a problem of graduate unemployment. As a result, many graduates are not able to find occupational work. Among the officially registered unemployed, the proportion of young people over the last 5 years has reached 30% and above. Of course, young people as a social group have their own peculiarities. Often they are connected with the difficulties of adaptation to modern society and economic conditions, with professional and social self-determination, employment and housing problems. The pathological condition in the youth environment is a result of the severe social situation of youth in Russian society. Despite all preventative measures, juvenile delinquency, drug addiction and overdose, and alcoholism continue to grow. The reasons for such moral degradation are both social distress and inability to organize leisure time, to find a job, drunkenness, low incomes, and a loss of social and moral guidelines resulting from parental indifference. The role of the social work system is to assure legal and economic guarantees become vital. It is vital that young people, young families, and social work institutions receive the correct financial help and state support. So, let us now discuss state youth policy. State youth policy refers to state activity aimed at the creation of legal, economic, and organizational guarantees for the self-realization of young people and the development of youth organizations, communities, and initiatives. State youth policy is one of the specified targets of legislative and executive authorities aimed at the creation of potential realization of youth and their successful integration into an independent life. State youth policy is the joint project of the states, political parties, and public associations. The stated targets of the youth policy are citizens of the Russian Federation, including foreign citizens and stateless persons, aged between 14 to 30, young families, and youth associations. Its subjects include government authorities and their officials, youth organizations and associations, as well as young citizens. The creation of a modern system of youth policy coordination began in January 1992, when the position of plenipotentiary representative of the Russian Federation for Youth Affairs was introduced by presidential executive order. Their responsibility is the coordination of different ministries and departments in the field of youth policy, methodological guidelines of committees on youth affairs, the development of implementation of state programs in the field of social development and social youth protection, and to ensure state support for youth and child organizations. In order to draw state and societal attention to the problems faced by young people, the Presidential Executive Order was issued on the 10th of June 1994, which formed the Council of Youth Affairs under the President of the Russian Federation with a Statute of Council. The next committee or reorganization was to occur on the 30th of April 1998. The committee functions were delegated to the Ministry of Labour and Social Development Department for Youth Affairs. However, on the 25th of May 1999, the State Committee for Youth Affairs was restored. Half a year later, it became a federal executive authority called to exercise functions of state administration and interbranch coordination in a sphere of youth policy. The priorities of the committee were as follows: the development of main state youth policy provisions and its implementation, cross-sectional issues involving the sphere of state youth policy, the methodological maintenance of executive bodies of the Russian Federation subjects' activity concerning state youth policy, the development and implementation in association with the concerned executive authority measures to protect young people's rights and legitimate interests, to create conditions for the resolution of social, financial and housing problems, and to organize education, employment and youth leisure activities, as well as aid in the development of healthy lifestyles. The development and implementation measures to support young families, young people with talent, young people and children's non-governmental associations, and to promote the intellectual and physical development of youth through a program of patriotic education. The Ministry of Education was reorganized into the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation by the Governmental Executive Order number 280 of the 5th of June 2004. The Committee for Youth Affairs became the Department for Youth Policy, Child Social Protection and Education. This department implements projects, programs and state youth policy functions at the federal level, deciding on the priorities in the field of youth policy, organizing events at national level. Youth Welfare Department of the Federal Educational Agency has a function of organizational and financial support of the planned activities in the field of youth policy. The bodies of legislative power also tackle the issues of youth policy. In 1995, the Committee for Matters of Women, Family and Youth were formed in the State Duma, and in 1997, the Federal Youth Council was established. So, youth authorities are available in all subjects of the Russian Federation. By the beginning of 2006, they employed more than 1,000 people. At the city and regional levels, about 3,000 people. And over 15,000 across the country were employed in youth social services. More than 400 youth and child public associations have taken part in the formation and implementation of state youth policy, including organization at the local, regional, national and international levels. In January 1992, the National Council of Youth and Child Associations was formed. In December 1998, at the conference of this council, a concept of interaction between state authorities in the Russian Federation was adopted. According to the Federal Law number 98 of the 26th of June 1995, on state support for young people's and children's social associations, the federal government-backed association register was established. It was kept on the basis of Regulation number 1104 of the 13th of June 1996, registered in the Ministry of Justice of the Russian Federation. The Register of Young People's and Children's Social Associations is maintained by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation. About 60 social government-backed organisations in the framework of the Federal Interagency Programme are within this register. So, state support for young people's and children's social associations. This refers to a set of measures taken by the public authorities of the Russian Federation under the laws of the Russian Federation. The supported objective includes the creation and maintenance of legal, economic and organisational conditions, guarantees the active incentives of the public associations, focused on social formation, development and self-realisation and the protection of the rights of young people. The youth public associations participate in drafting, examination and the introduction of laws and regulations that concern youth policy. They coordinate and facilitate projects and programs, implementation of youth and children's associations. The social importance of these organizations is generally recognized in Russia as they involve youth into the system of social relations by contributing to their social experience. Registers of children's and youth social associations are also formed at the regional level. The state encourages youth and children's programs and projects, allocates grants, subsidies, and provides with the organizational and informational support. In June 2001, the Coordination Council on Youth and Children's Social Associations Collaboration was established. It is an advisory body called to submit proposals on improvement of youth and children's social associations activity. The state youth policy of Russia is based on the large target programs. At the end of 2005, the 10-year agenda was decided upon. It defined the main goal of the state youth policy as the development of youth potential in the interests of Russia. An effective youth policy should be prioritized, focusing on the self-management of youth problems. It is supposed that taking into account social, economic and political tendencies of Russian development, the state youth policy in the Russian Federation should realize some priorities. Youth to be informed on the potential opportunities of Russian development and youth involvement in the social activity, development of innovative youth potential, the integration of young people who experience difficulties in their lives. Thus, the listed priorities determine the major trends and spheres of the initial state and public resource investment within state youth policy from the resources system of Russian youth support in order to promote the competitive advantages of young people. So according to the allocated priorities of the state youth policy principles, the strategy for its realization presupposes the usage of projects approach. In particular, 9 national projects that open equal opportunities for youth participation are offered. Among them are the Russian Youth Information Network, the All-Russian Construction Brigade, Volunteers of Russia, and Together. The exact perimeters of such projects will later be determined by the Federal Target Programme. Okay, so part 2 of our slideshow now refers to the youth authority institutions in slightly more detail, as well as concerning their activities. So, the system of youth authority institutions. The activity of youth authority institutions includes support, social services, and assistance in adoption and rehabilitation of youth. Social welfare institutions can be both state and municipal social youth institutions. So, the instruction letter number 3, let's just make that bigger. Okay, so the instruction level number 3 on the foundation of social youth welfare of the youth authorities from the Ministry of Education on September the 30th, 2002, refers to the state system of social youth welfare, the following institutions. State institutions and organizations of social welfare under the state ownership and under the supervision of youth authority institutions. The state institutions and organizations of social welfare under the constituent entities of the Russian Federation ownership and under the supervision of the state authorities of the constituent entities of the Russian Federation. Also, municipal institutions under local government's ownership and supervision. So, according to the model regulations, on Youth Welfare Authority's establishment, developed in 2005 by the Ministry of Education and Science Department of State Youth Politics in Education and Social Security of Children, Youth Authority institutions are the constituent entities of the Russian Federation, or municipal youth welfare authorities can become a founder of a service in the order stated by the above legislation. On the grounds of these regulations, the system of youth authority institutions includes youth authority institutions under the constituent entities of the Russian Federation ownership and under the supervision of state authorities of the constituent entities of the Russian Federation. Also, municipal institutions under local government's ownership and supervision. These institutes are established in order to provide social and legal security of teenagers and other young people, their integration into society and economic, political and cultural life of the country, region, settlement and town. Besides the orientation at leisure time arrangement among youngsters in their home areas, prevention of child neglect, juvenile delinquency and drug abuse must also be taken into account. The main aim of youth authority institution establishments is to create the conditions for the physical, intellectual and moral development amongst teenagers and other young people aged between 14 to 30. Such institutions provide psychological, social, educational, legal and informational services. They facilitate youngsters' employment, their career guidance, social and labour adaptation. They give support to young families, assisting in settling their living condition problems. They support talented young people, children's and youth public associations, young people's initiatives, and they build and develop human resources. The following institutions may be referred to as youth authorities: a complex centre for youth social welfare, a centre for social and psychological aid to the youth, social work for young people, a social youth centre, a centre for the youth social security, a centre of emergency psychological aid to young people given over the telephone. Other such institutions may include a youth fertility clinic, a centre for young people, for legal aid for young people. So here we go. A club for teenagers and young people, a social rehabilitation centre for teenagers and youngsters, and an occupational guidance and employment centre for young people. According to the resolution of the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Federation of June the 3rd, 1993, number 50901, on the main tendencies of the state youth policy in the Russian Federation, one of the main principles of the state youth policy is to supply a young citizen with a state-guaranteed minimum of social welfare, including education, training, intellectual and physical development, healthcare, professional training and employment. The size, type and quality of social service must meet the necessary personality development and preparation for independent life. So, social offices for young people provide both the following social and preventative services, such as diagnostic, correctional, vocational guidance, psychological and educational, medical and consulting, informational, legal, cultural, and the arrangement of leisure time. Moreover, services connected to the social adaptation and organisation of temporary accommodation of children and teenagers. The implementation of the mentioned social services is carried out by specialists in social work with young people and includes the identification and support of young families and individual young people who are in need of the various types of social support, the identification of the causes of difficulties that a young person experiences, including problems at home, at work or at school, and making decisions on the nature of the social support needed. Providing social and psychological rehabilitation to young people who suffer from addiction to alcohol, drugs, and who have also suffered from sexual abuse. Working with young people who are disadvantaged socially through medical or psychological living conditions. The identification of former students of orphanages and boarding schools who have no parents or are deprived of parental care. Underage mothers in need of job placement or other help. Assistance in activating the capacity of an individual, a family or a social group. Consulting on different questions in social services. assistance in paperwork for the acceptance of permanent or temporary social care, for guardianship and wardship. The assistance in entitling to accommodation in residential social service institutions, such as the social and rehabilitation centres for teenagers and young people, social hostels, crisis centres for assistance to women who suffer hardship, and others. A specialist in social work with young people works at the home area of young people who have got into difficult life situations and at the complex centres of social youth care. Centres of youth social care are complex centres of youth social care, centre of social and psychological assistance to young people, and other centres of social support. So, complex centres of youth social care. Such a centre of youth social care can be established both in a town and in a rural setting, where a complete range of social services can be provided. All the categories of young people living in a particular community can get support there. The priority areas of work of such a centre are career guidance and job placement. Another type of institution is a centre of social and psychological assistance to young people. Such centres function in the following areas: the provision of information and consultancy, correctional and educational work, medical and psychological consulting, medical rehabilitation, drug dependency treatment, family free time spending, and the information on the labour market. They also provide sociological research, child neglect prevention, career guidance, psychological correction, assistance in job placement, social help to young families, social help to orphans, social and club work, and emergency psychological help given over the telephone. These centres of social support to young people assist in adaptations of youngsters to the current life circumstances. The leading areas of work at such centres are job placement, career guidance, implementation of new social technologies, such as social diagnostics, social rehabilitation, social therapy, social protective measures, and others, as well as educational correction. One of the priority areas in youth social care is the prevention of the abuse of drugs and other psychoactive substances amongst young people. Social assistance offices are established to help the most socially disadvantaged groups of young people. Here the targets of social care are young people, young families and teenagers who are experiencing disadvantageous life conditions, such as conflicts and troubles with parents, absence of a residential place, absence of a working place, and so on. The area of work of such offices are information providing, methodology, and advertising and education, analysis and forecasting, social, therapeutic and medical areas, social and education, rehabilitation and preventative areas. In the centre of youth social care, social and therapeutic area includes the patronage of families or individuals in need of permanent or temporary care, having had been disadvantaged socially, demographically, having poor living conditions, young families, divorced spouses living in the same apartments, or families who have experienced a tragic death. Social and rehabilitation area includes assistance to those who are unemployed, immigrants, refugees, in the assistance of receiving benefits, permanent accommodation and job placement, disabled women with children, and teenagers willing to work. Youth social services activity is particularly important in rural areas. As a rule, in distant rural settlements, youth social service offices are established, which operate under the name of palaces of culture or other such clubs. Here, acute problems among young people in a particular settlement are first distinguished, and then mobile teams of specialists are arranged. They can provide emergency assistance in settling acute social problems. There is also a chance of arranging counselling by one of the specialists once a month in a particular setting. Such counselling helps to implement a longer corrective, social and therapeutic, social and rehabilitation work for a particular family or an individual. So, the activity of youth social authority institutions is aimed at the creation of advantageous conditions for the personal development of young people. In such institutions, specialists in social work with youngsters assist in overcoming the consequences of life hardships to a particular person. The interactions between a social worker and the young person result in that particular individual being made prepared for an independent life. So, the content and social work forms of social authority institutions. So, the content of social youth authority institutions is the system of successful realization of innovative technologies and forms of work aimed at the conditional arrangement for the development of young people. Major directions of social youth authority institutions activity are promoting youth employment, professional training, social preventative work, collective work forms. Social preventative work is organised by means of yard sites for youth, the military patriotic trend, and social club establishments. One of the major directions of social youth authority institutions activity is promoting youth employment. So this is achieved through the professional preparation and taking measures on employment by means of career and work placement fairs. For young people, an employer's consultations on the labour market, social works, temporal employment and quotas of workers. So professional training of the employment is carried out on the base of the complex social service centre for young people. The groups of young boys and girls are gathered here to attain qualifications. Students can be given work placements with leading enterprises. Work placements last approximately 3 months, and after its completion, the successful graduates receive certificates and can appeal to the Department of Youth Employment, where they will be helped to find employment. This form is effective for school leavers who have no opportunity to continue their education at professional training establishments. An important trend of social authority institutions activity is social preventative work that is realised by means of individual, group and collective forms. Many specialists recognise the efficiency of collective work forms with neglected teenagers. Their integration into secure and prosperous environments can hold in the conditions of children's associations. A social worker creates favourable conditions for the positive interpersonal relations in a summer camp. Pedagogical training is carried out through submitting equal, precise demands to the whole collective. At the end of any creative collective activity, a joint discussion contributes to the development of social skills that have been identified during practical cases, general camp and group activities. The social preventative work is organised by means of yard sites for youth at the place of residence. A social worker utilises here different game technologies and trains the skills of collective through creative activity. The programme of social rehabilitation includes also the protection of housing rights of the underage, the execution of registration documents, passport and medical insurance at the place of residence, among others. In each case, a social worker assists in the psychotherapeutical and medical care, and in the organisation of leisure activities such as computers, sports clubs and others. The work content of the social workers includes attendance of the teenagers taken into custody in detention facilities, carrying out conversations with teenagers and their families. The social workers of these establishments also take part in trials with the information on the carried out work with the defendant, or direct the report on the done work. The military patriotic trend that is realised in the juvenile and youth clubs of the youth authorities facilitates the development of spiritual moral values of young people. About 1,650 of such clubs for teenagers and youngsters are active in the Russian Federation. The social club establishment afford different grounds in form and content for personal growth, spiritual moral development of young people's objectives. The legal status of this institution is defined by the instructive letter of the Ministry of Education of the Russian Federation, number 5, of the 1st of November 2002, on juvenile and youth clubs of the youth authorities. So, the main aims of this institution are the development of youth motivation to the creativity and knowledge, realization of the supplementary educational programs, services in the interests of youth, society and state. The key tasks determining the content of the juvenile and youth clubs activity are as follows: the support of personal development, youth promotion, professional youth self-determination, adaptation facility, universal culture formation, and leisure activity organization. The institution organises work with the youth during the whole year. Social activity is provided in the one-age and multiple-age communities in compliance with youth interests, either studious, groups, sections or theatres. The content of the work is determined by the social worker in accordance with the study plans and programmes recommended by the state agency of educational body. The specialists can elaborate their own programmes, confirmed by the methodological body of the institution. The classes are conducted in compliance with the universal programme or complex programmes reflecting various trends of the youth club's activity. The content and forms of the youth social institutions contribute to the overcoming of difficulties, creating beneficial conditions for the youth's proactive approach to life, and bringing up a patriot with human value orientation. There are some peculiarities in the youth social institution activity. Mixed age collective, including except senior student professors, parents and public figures. Collaboration and interaction of different generations promotes continuity of the stored social experience, traditions, norms and values, and contributes to the efficient overcoming of difficulties. It is crucial to establish an individual style of interaction based on freedom, equality and mutual respect. The activity of these institutions should be based on the individual treatment of personality. Anyone who so desires can ask for help whenever convenient to them. This support is given to all young people who so require it. So, the content and organisation of social work with youth in the leisure sphere. The social work with youth in the leisure sphere is regulated by the corresponding part of the state youth policy. In this context, the general bases defining a position of the state and society in the given area are important. The important method of youth free time and leisure regulation is the control over the activity of such organisations that provide cultural and leisure time services to the youth. The main goal of such control is to provide leisure activity conditions that would meet the particular needs of young people and promote the formation of a higher level of leisure culture. It's to have a positive effect on the socio-cultural situation in the leisure sphere of modern youth. The organisation of youth leisure time is realised by four groups of institutions: commercial institutions, providing services for free time arrangement, youth organisations and associations, state culture institutions, and public authorities on youth affairs. The interests of each group of youth leisure time arrangement institutions differ significantly. The Committee for Youth Affairs, Department of Culture, Education and Science to the entities of the Russian Federation supervise the activities of youth computer clubs, discos. They revive the work with young people in the community via the creation of a unified system of social club space. The institutions of youth authorities, youth centres, clubs and palaces of youth art or youth clubs possess the fullest set of functions in free time arrangement of the young generation. The aim of youth centres on one hand is to satisfy culturally the interests and needs of different categories of young people in free time arrangement areas, whether their readiness for active leisure time activities is, on the other hand, to educate social students, young workers and employees. In their work with the youth, the centre follows the competition principles of mutual respect, trust and attention to the participants to each other, an individual approach and unity of interests between individuals and a group. In many communities, youth centres become a favourite and common holiday destination for meeting friends and acquaintances, for sensible leisure time, and for spending a relatively constant population mix between children, teenagers, youth and adults, while other centres, vice versa, are designed for ever-changing contingent of visitors who have an opportunity to make their free choice. The economic basis of youth centres activity consists of an economic mechanism involving the use of budget and non-budget funds, grants and earnings from equity participation of various departments, enterprises, institutions, public organisations, and income from providing commercial services, self-supporting groups, rents, etc. A youth centre or structure is based on the interaction between the labour of professional or semi-professional organisers, including regular social workers, tutors, directors, and, on the other hand, developing creative playing, entertaining and recreational activities for all participants, including children, teenagers, youth and adults. A youth centre may include various institutions: a cafe, a rental centre, a recording studio, a club, a library, a park, a museum, a theatre, or others. In youth centres, the programmes in various fields can be implemented: social and humanitarian, including rehabilitation and correction; artistic, sports and recreational; specific, scientific and engineering. Each youth centre is a kind of socio-cultural arena of activity of both various youth groups and individuals. The opportunities for such activities are provided in any youth centre, as in an amateur group, a family club, a disco or a game room. A youth centre provides a wide choice of leisure activity technologies that create the appropriate conditions for them. The functional model of such an institution is mobile and contains a set of options. Possessing a flexible organisational and functional model, a centre makes use of technologies aimed at the rapid changes in accordance with the changes in cultural policy objectives. Okay, so part 3 now. So slide 1 here. We're now talking about promoting youth employment and work placement. So, youth in the labour market. Russia's transition to the market economy has substantially changed the social and labour sphere. A labour shortage has been followed by a jobs deficit, leading to unemployment. It is no longer taken for granted that all citizens will be provided with jobs. In this respect, the great importance is given to the consideration of current processes taking place in the labour market, the analysis of the effects of unemployment growth, and the identification of peculiarities of social activity with certain categories of unemployed citizens, especially with the youth. A labour market is a system comprising of complex social and labour relations on the conditions of employment, use and exchange of labour force for means of subsistence. It is a mechanism of supply and demand, operating on the information about the change in labour costs. The need to analyse the situation of the youth in the Russian labour market is determined by a number of reasons. Firstly, young people make up about 35% of the capable population of Russia, and secondly, they are the future of this country, and the further development of this country depends on the initial conditions for their activity. Even today, young people determine the political, economic and social structure of this country to a large extent. However, it comprises one of the most vulnerable groups of our country. Youth labour market is a special social and demographic segment of the Russian economy, complying with its own laws that must be taken into account by the employment policy. Young people are characterized by instability in their life attitudes, lack of industrial work record and work experience, and consequently, a relatively low professional status. More competitive population groups glut the market, making the youth a well-marked risk. At the same time, unlike other disadvantaged groups, such as the disabled or women, the youth represent the most promising workforce category. Having still incomplete labour activity, status young people are still very receptive to all the changes and are capable of ever-changing employment functions, possessing tremendous opportunities for professional growth and the longest period of working career. Under the conditions of market relations, the problem of youth employment acquires new qualities. On one hand, employment issues are extremely important for young people, and on the other, not everyone is capable of exercising their needs in the professional sphere. The position of young people in society determines the number of objective and subjective factors: the level of material security, the opportunity to realize themselves in the professional field, to get education, to make a career, to provide their civil rights and social guarantees. While considering the employment problem, youth unemployment stands out for having especially acute negative consequences. Entering the labour market, young people, aged 14 to 30, differ in age, sex, educational level and attitudes to life. In this social group, one can distinguish at least 3 subgroups, each of them having its own specific features. The youth from 14 to 18 are represented mainly by students of high schools, vocational schools, colleges and universities. This is the very period of life when a young person acquires basic life values and standards of behaviour and tries to adapt to the existing conditions. One of the major objectives of this period is a choice of the future career. Young people are mostly not involved in labour activity. However, unlike the young people in more developed nations, where the age of entry into the labour activity objectively rises, the Russian youth have to start socio-economic relations much earlier. Yet even now, nearly 80% of young people earned their first money before they turned 18. It seems it must have positive results as a teenager develops working habits, independence and leadership qualities. Although it is not so, early experience prevents from getting proper education, resulting in a low qualification level. However, different sectors of the economy accept young workforce extremely unevenly. Generally, employers are not interested in teenage labour. The youth is represented largely in services and the entrepreneurship sectors. There is a lack of skilled young people in the public sector and in production. This may complicate the issues of personal supply, making it impossible to conduct a series of state reforms and lead to a crisis in certain areas. Young people keep leaving for the so-called shadow economy, which can lead to a degradation of state labour potential. For the state, it means the loss of a large number of skilled workforce capable of participating effectively in the development of the country. The second category includes young people aged 18 to 24, who are completing or have already completed a professional training or have served in the army. This group is quite vulnerable in the labour market, since it has no proper professional and social experience and, as a consequence, is less competitive. Employment is hindered by the level and the quality of education required and the lack of demand for graduates in the labour market. Now more than half of the graduates cannot find jobs according to their training, which negatively affects the professional development of a person and his career determination. Young people belonging to the two first subgroups usually enter the labour market for the first time and have lower educational and professional levels and have no work experience. All these factors tend to lower competitiveness. The first step of their career happen exactly at this period. At the age of 25 to 30, most of the young people have already made the decision about their professional career and have some experience. In this life period of them have started a family and they claim much from their future job. The absence of work for this category is perceived more painfully, resulting in serious social and psychological problems, such as family breakdown, the abandonment of children, involvement in criminal sphere, or addiction to drugs or alcohol. The peculiarity of the youth situation in the Russian labour market is determined by several factors. Sticking to stereotypes. Many employers negatively evaluate such qualities of young workers as a lack of working skills and inability to build relationships in a working environment, excessive emotionality and instability in behaviour, meaning all that provides social immaturity from a person, insufficient level of his socialization in the society. The scale and resistance of impact of such stereotypes lead to discriminatory treatment of the youth in the labour market. Also, the false idea of young people about the ways of adaptation to the fields of labour and employment. This occurs in the choice of future profession and further on in determining the perspectives of their own applicants. Of their own employment. The choice of field or specialisation of training is often made by an applicant taking into account the ideal view of their future job, without analysing the real situation of the labour market, whose data is now widely available to the public. Decline in the prestige of the productive labour for a significant proportion of young people. The fact that 25% of the youth are unemployed university graduates gives great concern. The following careers are of greatest demand among young people: an economist, accountant, manager, lawyer, creative specialist, programmer or entrepreneur. Modern Russian market of skilled labour is characterized by significant difficulties with the employment of young specialists. The problem is particularly acute in small towns and rural areas. Skilled young people often change their careers that may lead to a misbalance in the occupational structure of the workforce in the future. Workforce rich in content, but to the workforce brings towards substantial material benefits. Yep. No doubt all these cannot contribute to the economic recovery of this country. Analysis of the most demanded jobs for young people showed that there is a great demand for people willing to work in sales. The second place is taken by a variety of job offers in the field of information technology. Next comes a need for young specialists with economic education. Other common types of job offered to young specialists are those connected with accounting, jobs of secretaries and administrators. There is also demand for people with technical education. High mobility, low skills level, as well as a relatively high unemployment rate are particular features of the youth labour market. Almost a fifth of the unemployed is comprised by the youth who have no working experience. Today, it is still impossible to talk about the high level of psychological adaptation to the realities of our economy, as well as about the true ideas of young people about the nature and demand of the labour market. So, the situation in the Russian youth labour market is quite tense. The youth unemployment problems are connected largely to the objective processes, i.e. a decline in birth rate, a decline in birth rate, worsening of physical and mental health, living standards decreasing, and the impact of socio-economic factors in the way of life of young men. Labour socialisation of the youth occurs in the conditions of conflicting and ambiguous structural changes in the political, economic, social and cultural fields. And since the youth contingent is extremely heterogeneous in age, educational and professional levels, they need a special approach to solving the problems of their unemployment. So now I'll talk about social support for the unemployed youth. Unemployed youth is a complex socio-economic phenomenon in which the proportion of the economically active population who want to work in the conditions of employment or creation of their own businesses cannot realise or apply their workforce because of the lack of suitable jobs, i.e. proposals, and thereby deprived of basic incomes, i.e. wages. In accordance with the legislation of the Russian Federation, the unemployed are able-bodied citizens who do not have work and income, living in Russia, who are registered in the Employment Services domiciliary in order to find a suitable job, looking for a job and ready to start work. On the basis of the Russian legislation, citizens under the age of 16 and able-bodied citizens taking full-time course of education cannot be considered as unemployed. To create effective conditions for job placement and to solve the problems of the unemployed and their family members, employment services have established to provide complex regulation in the labour sphere. Assistance in youth job placements, one of the priorities of an employment centre. For efficient operation of the system of employment, youth labour exchanges have been set up in many regions to assist teenagers and young people in permanent or temporary employment. There are also youth employment and information centres, which are multidisciplinary social institutions engaged in psychological, professional, consulting and legal and informational services. The main goal of these organisations is to create favourable conditions for the integration of young people in the labour market, to adapt them to modern requirements of training and qualifications, reducing social tension among the youth of the region and society as a whole. To achieve this goal, it is necessary to solve the following problems: the creation of legal and managerial conditions to prevent a significant increase in youth unemployment, social psychological adaptation of young people to market conditions, unemployment with a focus on the interests and abilities of a person, creating a system of information to facilitate decision making on employment, training and retraining, legal education of youth, the prevention of crime among teenagers and young people, assistance system supporting young families. Tasks are implemented on the basis of the relevant regional social programs. The effective way of social protection of young people in a market economy is unemployment insurance. In Russia, in accordance with the current legislation, the state guarantees the following: free choice of activities, including different terms of employment, health and safety, legal protection against unfair dismissal or unjustified dismissal in accordance with the Russian Federation labour legislation, free assistance in finding suitable work and employment under the mediation of the employment services. Unemployed people aged 18 are guaranteed for free obtaining of professional orientation services, training, retraining and advanced training, psychological support and the referral of the employment services. Providing social support, compensation of material costs due to the direction of the work to another location of the proposal and the employment services in accordance with the legislation of the Russian Federation. free medical care and medical examinations for unemployment and direction to training, the ability to enter into fixed-term contracts to participate in paid public works, organised according to the age and other characteristics of citizens. An important component of the state's social support for young people is the payment of benefits and compensation due to unemployment. The state guarantees to the unemployed unemployment benefit, including the period of temporary incapacity of the unemployed, fellowship payment during vocational training, advanced training, retraining on the referral of employment services, an opportunity to participate in paid public works, reimbursement of expenses in connection with the voluntary relocation to another place of employment on the proposal of the employment services. Citizens contracting employment service have the right to consult on the choice of fields of their activity, employment and vocational training. Working young people who want to change jobs can also apply to the employment service to find a suitable job. Employment service does not only solve the social, economic and psychological problems of an unemployed person. Predicting the behaviour of the unemployed in the labour market, diagnosis and the correction of any negative psychological states is one of the main activities of the employment services for youth work. Stable emotional states contributes to rapid employment. So, 20 is promoting youth employment can be organised in several ways. Youth education is a complex problem, and its solution involves the interaction and cooperation of different structures: public authorities, employment services, education and youth committees. One of the activities is to promote the further education of young people through the organisation and functioning of specialised clubs and centres of further education. To prevent the increase of new unemployed, it is necessary to conduct a systematic professional work with applicants, which should contribute to the individual in professional self-determination, taking into account not only the needs and opportunities, but also the situation in the labour market. The programme, Path to the Profession, is implemented for successful adaptation of school children to work. The aim of this programme is to perform a significant role in professional self-determination of a student. The programme implementation gives an opportunity to involve students in career counselling. The Efficient Labour Market Behaviour is a programme directed at a more mature category of youth, aged between 18 to 23, i.e. vocational school graduates. It offers active forms of learning the skills of effective behaviour in the labour market. The main problem of the graduates is not in their inappropriate education, but they cannot competently build relationships with employers during the employment period. It is known that the employers are more likely to hire outgoing, confident, active people, and most importantly, those who are creative in solving problems. The programme not only determines the practical experience of job placements, but also develops the personal qualities of young people, making them much more competitive in the labour market. The implementation of these programmes gives young people the opportunity to effectively adapt to the current labour market conditions. So, the facilitating youth training. The right of young people for free vocational training, advanced training and retraining on the referral of the employment service takes an important place in the system of social protection of the population from unemployment. Vocational training, retraining and training of the unemployed youth is implemented in educational institutions of vocational and further education, training centres of the unemployment services, educational organisation or in other educational institutions, in accordance with the concluded agreements of the employment offices. Young people with disabilities, long-term unemployed people, i.e. after 6 months of unemployment, those discharged from military service, graduates of educational institutions, as well as the first-time job seekers while having no profession and so on, have the right of priority to undergo vocational training, retraining and other forms. The effectiveness of the system of vocational education for young people is confirmed by a high proportion of citizens' employment after graduation. Changing of youth employment order. Nowadays, employers make excessive demands on young specialists. Many companies don't see possibilities for future development of juvenile and youth labour. They don't respect young people's skills and capabilities and don't see conditions for their career growth within their own companies. Consequently, the moderation of youth employment criterion, such as employment without work experience or flexible working hours for full-time students, might be the main social protection measure. Today, we have a good opportunity to combine juvenile secondary employment with their future profession. A given form of youth employment oriented at performing social functions could be economically advantageous for both companies and enterprises. The social effects from implementation of juvenile secondary employment can justify the economic costs of its realization, as the process of introduction to labour activity definitely has a positive effect on young people. So, the quota system for young people. To strengthen social protection of young people, some municipal bodies have already adopted a resolution on quota arrangement of job vacancies for the youth. However, due to the absence of the relevant law, there is an unprotected category of young people who are not guaranteed to find a workplace. So, development of entrepreneurial activity. A system of youth employment is quite characteristic of partial or hidden youth unemployment, where the employer gives an opportunity for his employee to have a part-time working week and doesn't register him. According to many specialists, to normalize the situation with the employment, it is necessary to develop entrepreneurship, especially in small towns and rural regions. Small and mid-sized businesses initiate the emergence of additional workplaces. They contribute to business activity of citizens, including those who are less competitive on the labour market. Strategically, we speak about the upbringing of financial, economic, scientific, educational, socio-political, cultural and spiritual resources of our country. In this respect, the entrepreneurial activity should be regarded as a separate educational field which must be developed in two directions. The first direction applies to all young people without any exception. It is aimed at the development of their capabilities, knowledge and skills in design and practical activities, and the formation of entrepreneurial image. The second one is the preparation line for future entrepreneurs in industrial production, services, commerce, advertising, mass media, banking and other fields, who will form new resources from the aim of gaining profit. So, attracting young people to paid public works. To support unemployed young people, the state must finance public works in an attempt to attract youth. Under the term public works, we understand any working activity orientated at social benefit and organised as an additional social support for citizens looking for a job. All young people registered at employment agencies have the right to participate in public works. The prerogative right to participate in public works is given to unemployed young people who do not receive benefits and to citizens who have been registered in unemployed agencies for a long time, over 6 months. The participation of citizens in public works is possible only with their consent. Their health, condition, age and professional features must be taken into account. Public works reduce social tension and provide young people with the working places and wages. The proportion of citizens under 30 years old who have engaged in public works is about 30% throughout Russia. In general, these are people who are looking for their first job without any experience. However, their monthly earnings are very small. That's why the volume of citizens' involvement into public works depends not only on financing, but also on their wish to participate in public works. So, organisation of job fairs. In order to provide citizens with additional employment services, employment agencies together with employers organise job fairs. A given form of work gives any interested person a splendid opportunity to get acquainted with the database of available agencies, to find a job without any assistance, and to clarify the conditions and options of employment through direct communication with the employer. In recent times, many fairs and specialised fairs for certain groups of population, i.e. young people, disabled, specialists in particular areas, or highly qualified employees, have become widespread. The creation of special youth organisations for solving the employment issues. Nowadays, social enterprises for young people are a real phenomenon in the youth labour market. In spite of the fact they act in various sectors of the youth branches, these enterprises, thanks to the problems which they solve, can be singled out into a separate category. During the process of creation of social enterprises, one has to overcome a number of problems connected with the uncertainty of their legal status. Alongside the major task of such organisations is the fulfilment of the most important social functions, i.e. to take adolescents from the streets to reduce tensions in youth environments. The creation of working places for teenagers and youth gives them an opportunity to combine work and study, to make a career choice and to gain experience in labour activity. Organising training for youth employees and enterprise is being involved in the implementation of social youth policy. In this regard, it is important to create and develop mechanisms which would allow young people not only to earn money, but also to learn new and interesting professions, to gain experience and acquire knowledge. When a teenager gets necessary professional skills, he can become a sound participant of the labour market. These are various forms of organisation of working places for students, such as non-profit organisations and social productions on the basis of educational institutions. So, the legal regulation of youth policy. The necessity of the formation of legal base in the field of state youth policy is defined by the increase of a number of social problems of young people which have a negative effect on social, economic, cultural and spiritual aspects of its vital functions and future prospects. Measures taken to increase the educational level of young people, their employment, solution of housing problems and development of versatile skills are not effective enough due to their weak coordination and insufficient legal security. All above mentioned measures complement each other, therefore their mutual complex and purposeful implementation is considered to be rational. The strategy of motivation can be effective only when it takes into account historically developed conditions and the national character of definite regions and republics. State and federal social programs must stimulate the creation and structural changes of working places in economically promising branches, attracting not only budget funds, but also financial funds of private enterprises and investors. So, time for some conclusions. Young people occupy an important place in public relations, in production of material and spiritual wealth. However, their social position and the degrees of participation in creative activity directly depend on the actions of state and society. Today, our state and society are not ready to overcome their consumer attitude to youth, making young people occupy a dependent position. These days, we can watch just the beginning of the process of youth subjectivity formation based on what I made for my country and not what my country made for me principle. This principle requires appropriate approaches from the state and society, a creation of a new system of youth work. Today, the task of society and the state is to support public youth organisations which direct the activity of the youth towards public interest and the interests of state development. The state youth policy in the sphere State youth policy in the sphere of organisation and leisure maintenance of young people has to form the ideology of positive forms of youth and children's leisure and their healthy lifestyles. It is important for bodies on youth affairs to form a special style of mutual relations based on freedom, equality and respect. The activities of institutions should be based on individual approaches to each person. All young people in need must get support. Youth work should never be based on patronisation and paternalism, but on stimulating the activity of young people and creating conditions for their independent problem solving. Youth work is not orientated at the creation of benefits for young people. It is the systemised investment policy providing investments in the youth through organisation and stimulation of work, initiated by the youth itself. Adapted programmes of youth work must have systemised, long-term and sustainable characters. For coordination and working out of the major directions of youth work, it is necessary to improve the structure of youth work management from federal to municipal level. Youth work should be carried out optionally in the subjects of the Russian Federation, taking into account specific features of the regions and local conditions under strict compliance of basic federal standards. The participation in state and social building, the protection of youth's rights and interests must be guaranteed to all young people in all subjects of the Russian Federation. The situation on the youth labour market remains tense. State policy in this direction must be clearly performed. We should take measures to avoid the beginning of mass employment among young people. One cannot allow the stopping reproduction support of this intellectual potential of society. So, in conclusion, there is a prototype of the Russian future laid out in the modern youth. Which direction to choose for the future development of Russia will mainly depend not only on the successful socio-economic reforms, but also on the youth stimulus to participate actively in these reforms. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed.